So we are done with the All-Star break and the second half of the NBA season is here. And I asked you guys on my community tab here on YouTube to give me one hot take for your favorite NBA team for me to react to for a video. So here we are. And if you guys want to be featured in these in future videos, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you guys know when I do drop these community posts. So we're going to start off with Defense's hot take. And he says that with a career high in points, assists, and steals, Jordan Poole has been playing like a top 100 player this season. And I honestly don't think this is a super hot take at all. Jordan Poole has definitely rebounded after a poor first year in Washington. We know that Jordan Poole struggled in the beginning of the 2024 season. He got better as the year went on and finished strong at the end of last year's regular season. And his efficiency has carried over this year. He is shooting 41% from the field, which is maybe a little bit lower than you would like for him to, but he's shooting 37% from three on crazy volume, 9.5 threes a night. He's shooting 87.5% from the free throw line and is averaging 21 points, 5 assists, 3 rebounds, and 1.4 steals for an offense that doesn't have much around him. So I honestly think putting up 21 points and shooting 37% from three in this Washington Wizards offense, when there's not a lot of guys on this team that can create their own shot, now with Kyle Kuzma in Milwaukee, and Jordan Poole is just going to have 2 years left on the deal, around $65 million in the offseason, I think there's a chance he rebounded his trade value and he could get moved in this summer. Next one comes from Chief here, and it's about the Golden State Warriors, and he mentions that the Warriors with Jimmy Butler will make it to the NBA Finals. Definitely a hot take. So at the end of the first half of the NBA season, Jimmy Butler and the Warriors, since getting acquired, went 3-1. He finished out strong. He's been averaging 21 points, 7 rebounds, and 5 assists, shooting 44% from the field and 14% from three. And this is obviously with Jimmy Butler playing a smaller sample size in Miami this year, just 25 games, going back and forth between being suspended and being active on the team. So I do think it was going to take a little bit of time for Jimmy to get ramped up again, but he has looked great so far in a Warriors uniform. And I think this is exactly what the Warriors needed in the short term, a co-star that could take some of the load off Steph Curry, that can operate in the half court, that can work in isolation, work out of the pick and roll. And I do think it gives the Warriors a better chance to winning the NBA Finals this year than what they originally had with Kyle Anderson, Dennis Schroeder, and Andrew Wiggins. I just can't see this team winning multiple playoff series. If they do get into the playoffs, it's most likely going to be a 7 or an 8 seed. Can they beat Denver and OKC in round number 1? I wouldn't say so, but hey, you never know if Jimmy's going to be playing at an all-star caliber level in Golden State. You know what? Not a lot of people talk about the Portland Trailblazers, so we are going to get a double take here from Coconut Kid Magic. He's going to say that Toumani Camara will at least have 5 all-defensive teams by the time he retires. And then even though people clown on Chauncey Billups, the players seem to love him and have a lot of respect for him. He's obviously not the best coach, but I think he gets hated on a little too much. Now, the first take there about Toumani Camara, honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if he ended up on 5 all-defensive teams as well. He's an incredible perimeter defender, an incredible point of attack defender, and a good post defender as well for somebody that's 6'8", can guard multiple positions, can move laterally pretty quickly, and has good footwork as well on the defensive end of the floor. And in productive offense from Camara this year, he's looking like one of the better second-round picks that we've seen in the last few years, and he was the 52nd overall pick in the 2023 draft and was basically a throw-in in the DeAndre Ayton Yusuf Nurkic trade. It is hilarious that the best player the Blazers got back in the whole Yusuf Nurkic Damian Lillard trades at the end of the 2023 offseason, it wasn't DeAndre Ayton, it wasn't Malcolm Brogdon, it wasn't Robert Williams, it was Toumani Camara. And then for his Chauncey Billups take, I could also agree with this one as well. I think a lot of people, including me, have learned to just dislike Chauncey Billups in Portland with the rotations, the bouncing scoot in and out of the starting lineup. But I think there definitely are some fair questions to have about Chauncey Billups' tenure in Portland. But if this winning streak can spark at least the guys rallying around Chauncey Billups, I'm okay for him to be the Blazers head coach for a little bit longer. I just would like to see still more younger development from Scoot, Klingon, and definitely Shaedon Sharpe. For the Minnesota Timberwolves, this one comes from Random Planet, and they mentioned that the Wolves are going to realize the difference in their recent play is Naz Reid over Julius Randle and move Julius Randle to the bench. And already a much improved Wolves team with the young runners will get bolstered by Mike Conley, DiVincenzo, and Randle all coming back into more fitting roles, and it will get the Wolves into a top 4 seed. Now, I do think with all these injuries that Minnesota has right now, and none of these are major injuries outside of maybe Dante DiVincenzo's, it could be a blessing in disguise because we're seeing more reps for Terrence Shannon Jr., Rob Dillingham, and Jaylen Clark, and the Wolves are going to need some of these guys to step up if they want to make some type of playoff run like they did last year in 2024. And now this team looks definitely a little bit different with Karl-Anthony Towns in New York. They are currently the 7th seed right now, but I do think there is a solid chance that they could end up as high as the 4th seed at the end of the year. So it's definitely possible they could end up as a top 4 seed, like this person mentions. And I think I'm okay with Naz Reid becoming a starter as well. He's shooting 40% from 3 this year. He's been great over his last few games with Julius Randle out of the lineup. It's just, does Julius Randle want to come off the bench? That's a big question. Mention that the Thunder are a top 5 defensive team of all time. Not only do the stats back it up, but if you watch full games, we are truly looking at a historic defense. Now, this is definitely going to be a hot take saying that they are a top 5 defensive team of all time, but it may not be the craziest take in the world. So far this year, the Thunder have by far the best defensive rating in the NBA team-wise at 105.4. The next lowest is the Orlando Magic at 109.2. And last year, the Minnesota Timberwolves had the best defensive team in the NBA, and they had a 109 defensive rating. The Thunder are almost 4 points better than that per 100 possessions this year. And when you talk about how many all-defensive caliber players they have, when you're talking about Lou Dort, Kaysen Wallace, Alex Caruso, J-Dub, Shea, Chet when he's healthy, Isaiah Hartenstein, even Kenrich Williams, I think plays super underrated defense. This team can switch on anybody. They can guard guys full court, in the half court, in the post, on the perimeter. I don't know about a top 5 defensive team of all time because you really have to look at era inflated numbers. Obviously, there's a lot more scoring today, but that makes this Thunder defense even more impressive. If you look back at the 2022 season, you had some really good defenses with the Golden State Warriors and the Boston Celtics, but the Thunder have a better defensive rating than those two teams. You would have to look back at the 2020 Bucks, who had a 102 defensive rating. They're the last team to have a better team defensive rating better than the Thunder, but hey, teams are shooting a lot more threes. Scoring is way higher than it was 5 years ago, so that makes this Thunder defense even more impressive. So Volcanic with a hot take here. The Suns will make it into the playoffs and at least get into the second round this year. Yeah, I'm going to have to disagree with this hot take. The Phoenix Suns are currently 26-28. They're the 11th seed in the Western Conference. The team ahead of them, the Golden State Warriors, added at the deadline. They added Jimmy Butler. The Sacramento Kings, while they did trade away De'Aaron Fox, who are the 9th seed, they still are trying to stay competitive with Zach LaVine. The Mavericks at the 8th seed, we know they are trying to make the playoffs after their big moves. Minnesota, both LA teams, all ahead of the Phoenix Suns right now. To be honest with you, I think there's a better chance that the Suns miss out on the play-in tournament as a whole than make it to the playoffs. This team has had a massive drop-off from last year where they were a top 10 team net rating-wise. This year, they can't play a lick of defense. They were ranked 27th in the NBA in terms of defensive rating, and they are ranked 20th overall in net rating. They are a bottom 10 team this year, which is actually incredible because they are the most expensive NBA team in NBA history. It's actually mind-blowing how disappointing the Phoenix Suns have been this year. I don't think they got that much better at the deadline. I don't think adding Cody Martin and Vassell Micic is really going to do much for this team down the stretch. And maybe they do end up making the play-in tournament, and maybe they do end up beating 2 teams in the 10-9 matchup, and then again for the 8th seed. But honestly, I just can't see that happening, and I do think we're going to just inevitably be at a crossroads of Kevin Durant being traded from Phoenix in the offseason. This is an interesting one coming from Bobby Keon, and they mentioned that Devin Vassell is plateauing currently and needs to be traded this offseason before his value tanks. So we did see this in the past with Keldon Johnson peaking in 2023 with the San Antonio Spurs, and his numbers have been going down since, and he's still getting paid a decent amount of money for the next few years. Devin Vassell's numbers have been going down at least from the last 2 years, where in 2023, he averaged a career high 18.5 points. He broke out that year and shot 38% from 3. I was so excited to watch Devin Vassell with Wemby in 2024. And honestly, I wasn't disappointed. He averaged 19.5 points, 4 assists, 4 rebounds, and shot 47% from the field and 37% from 3. But this year, Devin Vassell's numbers are down across the board. Now, he has been banged up, but he's shooting 43% from the field, which is the lowest since his sophomore year, 35% from 3, which is down from last year, and is averaging 15.9 points, and his minutes are down as well. And I still think Devin Vassell could be a good player around De'Aaron Fox, their newly acquired star point guard, and Victor Wembanyama. But Bobby Keon does have an interesting point here. Could the Spurs look to trade Vassell in the offseason while he still has like this young value around him? Because if he puts up similar numbers next year, I don't know if teams are going to be as eager to trade for him just because he's going to be making $27 million basically every year until 2029. For the Houston Rockets, Marie mentions that the Rockets are a first round exit. And sadly, they are a fan. They're just too young of a team right now. And I can get behind this hot take as well. The Houston Rockets are currently still a top 5 defensive team in the NBA, but they've been struggling leading up to the All-Star break. They ended up getting blown out by the Brooklyn Nets, which was kind of shocking. They lost by double digits to the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Dallas Mavericks, and they lost to the Warriors before the All-Star break. And they didn't add anybody at the trade deadline. They were rolling with this team throughout the second half of the year, and we know their weaknesses. We know that they struggle from behind the three-point line, and they struggle sometimes offensively, especially in the clutch. And if I'm looking at teams in the Western Conference that I think could beat Houston in round one, the list is longer than I thought. I think OKC would beat them in round one, Denver, the Lakers, Minnesota, and then you're talking about Memphis, I think could beat them. Who knows with the Clippers? That would be a defensive battle. If Dallas is fully healthy, I think they could beat the Houston Rockets in round one. So I think I'm starting to list out more teams I think could beat Houston in round one than Houston can beat. And that's fine. They're fine being a first round exit, I think, in my opinion, just because they are a young team. Everybody's under contract. But I do wonder if ownership is going to pressure the front office to make a big splash this offseason. James mentions for the Raptors that the current Raptors rebuild won't be sustainable enough to compete in the stacked East in the future. The current core has a high floor, but a low ceiling. It won't ever be enough to be competitive. I'm sure Raptors fans are going to like this one. So they did just trade for Brandon Ingram for pennies on the dollar on what Brandon Ingram should actually go for, a 27-year-old two-way stud that could shoot at an efficient level and can score the ball in a plenty of different ways. But you look at this team's cap sheet for the next few years, as Scotty Barnes is going to be making $41 million. Brandon Ingram is going to be making $40 million. Emmanuel Quickly, $30+ million. RJ Barrett is now looking like a value contract at $28 million. And Jakob Poeltl at $19.5 million. This team is going to be over the salary cap next year with that five. Do you think that five can be a playoff team in the Eastern Conference? I mean, the East is wide open. I think anybody can make it into the Eastern Conference playoffs. And this team, if they could stay healthy, definitely could do so. But I could also agree with James that this team doesn't have as high of a ceiling as can Scotty Barnes be a number one in the NBA. This year, his numbers are down from last year now that he's a true number one throughout the season. But Scotty has been banged up with a plethora of injuries this year, so I want to see him fully healthy next year. How is he going to work with Brandon Ingram in the half court? Can they coexist next to each other? Is this going to be as good of a fit as he was being Scotty Barnes playing with Pascal Siakam, or is it going to be a worse fit than those two ended up having in the 2024 season? Emmanuel Quickly's been down this year, but he's also been banged up. Is RJ Barrett going to get extended by this team, the Toronto native? I think there are a lot of question marks with this Raptors team ceiling, so I could definitely see the reasoning for this hot take from James. This one comes from Pistons fan, and they mentioned that Cade Cunningham has the personal features and physical abilities to be the next face of the league. He lists that he's a top 25 player in the league, great leadership skills, gives the right responses in interviews, and the 28-game losing streak last year was the beginning of his redemption arc. I don't know if Cade Cunningham could be the face of the league. I think we have to realize that that is a very high feat to accomplish, that only a handful of players in NBA history have become the face of the league, and I feel like it also has to happen naturally. Like when reporters are asking NBA players, like, do you think you could be the face of the league? I feel like that's just a lose-lose question for the NBA player, just because NBA fans have to rally around you as the face of the league. Nobody just elects you as the face of the league. It's not like electing a president. So Cade Cunningham definitely has the numbers and the age right now, as he's putting up 25 points, 6 rebounds, and 9.5 assists as a 23-year-old. He was listed as an all-star this year, and he could definitely be on an all-NBA team as well, but I don't know if he's going to have the team success to end up becoming the face of the league. Like Kobe Bryant dominated the NBA in the 2000s, LeBron in the 2010s, and even if you want to say Steph Curry and Kevin Durant, they had their team success as well as some of the more recent face of the NBAs. I'm not sure if Cade is going to have that overall success in Detroit, at least with this current roster. Maybe over time he will, but I do think it's a long shot at this moment. This next one comes for the New Orleans Pelicans, and they mentioned that the Pelicans are the most underwhelming team of all time. They've had 3, now 2, since Brandon Ingram is in Toronto, all-star caliber players, hands down some of the best role players in the league, great at drafting and enough defense, and they should realistically be top 10 in the league, but it's truly surprising how terrible they've been in all parts of this season. Now, they also mentioned that they do have some of the worst injury luck we have seen in modern sports history, but they are running out of excuses fast. And I do wonder if the Pelicans have maybe squandered this window a little bit post Anthony Davis trade in 2019, as now Brandon Ingram is in Toronto, Lonzo Ball is in Chicago, Josh Hart is in New York. So they don't have many direct players from that trade. They don't have actually any from that trade anymore, and it's a lot of draft picks that could still be around. But hey, Dyson Daniels was used from that trade, and now he's in Atlanta, and this team still has a ton of talent, but like this person said, they've had some of the worst injury luck in NBA history. I do think if Herb Jones could be healthy next year, and Zion could be healthy, I know that's always a big if, and Trey Murphy could be healthy, this team could still be a playoff team in the Western Conference. But I think with CJ McCollum getting up there in age a little bit, DeJounte Murray tearing his Achilles, and he's going to be banged up all of next year's season, and Brandon Ingram is in Toronto, I think their ceiling is definitely going to be lower next year than what it was this year, unless they win the Cooper Flag sweepstakes. This next one is about the Indiana Pacers, and it comes from AK saying that Benedict Mathurin would by far be the best player on the Pacers if he got the same opportunity as someone like Tyrese Halliburton. Now, they're not far off in field goals attempted per game. Pascal Siakam's taking around 15 shots a night, Halliburton around 14 shots, and Mathurin around 12 shots. So he's taking 2 less shots per game than Tyrese Halliburton, and he's averaging just a point less than Halliburton. So it's definitely possible that Mathurin could average more points than Halliburton this season if he does have a strong second half. As Mathurin has appeared in 51 games this year, he's averaging 16.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, 2 assists, and is shooting 47% from the field and 35% from 3. I do feel like Mathurin has been more consistent as a scorer this year for the Indiana Pacers than Tyrese Halliburton has. He does have his bad games sometimes where he's shooting 30% from the field and he's scoring under 10 points. And he's not able to impact the game in as many ways as Tyrese Halliburton can when they're not having the best shooting nights in the world. But I don't think this is the craziest take in the world, and I wouldn't be surprised if Mathurin finished with more points per game than Halliburton, but I'm not sure if he'd be better than what Pascal Siakam is right now. I do think there's a difference in talent level between Siakam and Mathurin, at least as a primary scorer. Because you got to realize, if Mathurin was the number one, he would be guarded by the team's best defenders, and he's currently guarded by the team's second and third best defenders right now because defenses are more focused on Halliburton and Siakam. This one comes from Horse2, and they say that the Nuggets would be a championship favorite or close to it if DeRon Holmes hadn't torn his Achilles in the summer league. Not that he'd be putting up great numbers, but having that flexibility in a legit Jokic backup is really what we're missing. Now, I do think DeRon Holmes would give them a better chance of winning it all because he'd be an upgrade over DeAndre Jordan as the backup 5. I don't really think it would change their chances too much, but I do think that Denver is turning into the second best team in the Western Conference right now, as they're currently 6th in the NBA in terms of net rating. They are a top 5 offensive team. They still struggle defensively, but Nikola Jokic is looking like an MVP once again, putting up all-time numbers, honestly, this year. 30 points, 12 rebounds, 10 assists. He's averaging almost a 30-point triple-double at 29.8 points per game on 57, 45, 82 splits. The fact that Jokic might not win MVP with those numbers is kind of insane, and the Nuggets were one of the hottest teams in the NBA leading up to the All-Star break with blowout wins over the Pelicans, the Magic, the Blazers, and the Suns. And yeah, they do struggle defensively, and I'd be really intrigued to see a Denver OKC playoff series. And I do wish we were able to see DeRon Holmes' rookie year with the Nuggets, but I don't think he would change their title chances too much. This one comes about the Brooklyn Nets, and they mentioned that this version of the Nets is a better team from players to coaches than what we had last year and the half year before that after we traded KD. We are on pace for the same amount of wins, and that's with us trading vets. And then you also have Cam Thomas only playing 19 games so far. Our talent is much worse, but they play with effort and purpose. Jordi Fernandez is just a phenomenal coach. Not a bad take here whatsoever, as yeah, the Nets have been just as competitive this year as they were in the last year and a half, like this person mentioned. Last year, the Nets finished with a 32-50 record, and they can get somewhat close to that this year with a much inferior roster. They're currently 20-34. They are definitely a little bit worse than last year's team, but hey, with all the assets you got for Mikal Bridges in the offseason, picked up some second-round draft capital in the Dorian Finney-Smith and Dennis Schroeder trades, and you still have the Cam Johnson trade asset coming up this offseason. Same with Nick Claxton, Daron Sharp, Cam Thomas. And the Nets are projected to have 4 first-round picks in the 2025 draft, so they're going to have an influx of young talent this upcoming offseason. And yeah, I think Jordi Fernandez gives them a great chance to succeed in the future. He has done a phenomenal job this year as the Nets head coach with the roster he's been given. Javi says here for the Dallas Mavericks that Dallas is going back to the NBA Finals and Kyrie Irving is winning Finals MVP. The Mavericks are in such a tough spot right now. They're currently the 8th seed in a competitive Western Conference. They're 4 games above 500. They are a top 10 team in terms of net rating this year, still a top 10 offensive team and around league average defensively. I do think if this team is fully healthy, they can compete for an NBA title, and I think they could beat OKC, they could beat LA, they could beat Denver in the playoffs. It's just, are they going to be healthy? Because everybody is hurt right now. Anthony Davis, in his first game where he looked so good, suffered a serious abdominal injury. He's going to miss the next few weeks. Daniel Gafford is out for at least the rest of the regular season. Derek Lively's hurt. PJ Washington is hurt. All your main contributors are hurt right now, and Kyrie Irving is doing so much to carry this team offensively. He was a deserving all-star. He shouldn't have been a replacement. He should have been an original all-star this year, and he's had some phenomenal games, putting up 30 points in their overtime loss against the Sacramento Kings. He put up 42 points in an electric game against the Warriors in their 4-point win. If they're healthy, I could get behind this hot take, but if they're not, this team may just be a play-in tournament exit, which may cause the fans to riot the American Airlines Center yet again. 613 mentions that if Jalen Suggs is healthy, the Orlando Magic can easily make it to the conference finals and maybe even the NBA Finals. I don't know about this one, as Jalen Suggs has been out of the lineup since late January. He's currently dealing with a quad injury, and Suggs' numbers this year were down a little bit in terms of efficiency, where he was shooting 41% from the field, down 6% from the 2024 season. His shot from three was at 31%, down 8% from the 2024 season. And I do think Suggs is playing a different role in this Orlando Magic offense. He's becoming more of a primary ball handler compared to last year, where at times he was more of a two guard. And I don't know if that's going to put the Orlando Magic over the hump. I do think if the Orlando Magic are fully healthy with Paolo at 100%, Franz and Suggs all at 100%, they could definitely win a playoff series, but I'm not taking this team over Boston or Cleveland right now. Maybe they're able to pull off an upset over the Knicks or the Bucks, but this team just can't shoot at all. They are by far the worst shooting team in the NBA, and I don't think that's changing if they get to 100% health-wise. This one comes from Rado, and they mentioned that the Lakers are closer to being a first-round exit than a conference finals team, and I high-key agree with this one. Now, I was a little bit skeptical on the Lakers making a deep playoff run after the Luka Doncic trade, which is completely fine. This blockbuster trade wasn't about the Lakers this season. It's how they are going to look like in the post-LeBron era. But after they went out and traded for Mark Williams, I was like, you know what? Maybe there is a chance this team could go up against anybody in the Western Conference with Luka, Reeves, and LeBron offensively, and then you do have Mark Williams and Dorian Finney-Smith in the front court. That could definitely win multiple playoff series, but now that their center depth is Alex Len, Jackson Hayes, I just don't think it's going to be enough to get it done. I do think Jokic can have his way with this Lakers team or some of the other better bigs in the West. And yeah, if they went up against Houston or Memphis in round number one, I do think it's a possibility they could win a playoff series. But if they end up going up against like a Minnesota, a Denver, an OKC, or maybe even a Dallas, I'm not sure if they can get out of round one if their opposing teams are at full strength. But that's fine. Who cares about this year for the Lakers? You guys have Luka Doncic. Sporty says that the Knicks are the best team in the Eastern Conference. This is definitely a hot take, as the Knicks recently played the Boston Celtics, and they didn't have OG Anunoby, but the Celtics didn't have Jrue Holiday or Kristaps Porzingis, and the Knicks ended up losing that game 131-104. And while the Knicks have pretty much dominated the other teams in the Eastern Conference this year, like the Indiana Pacers, the Milwaukee Bucks, and they've had their fair share of wins against the other teams in the East, I just don't think they're going to be able to beat Boston and Cleveland in a playoff series. Maybe there's a world where the Knicks upset the Cavs in a round two series, but the odds of that happening are a little bit low because they're probably going to have to get Boston in that 2-3 matchup in round two. And then you have to go through Boston, which is going to be a grueling 7-game series. And then you have to go play Cleveland, who's one of the best teams in the NBA. I just don't see the Knicks pulling that off, even at full strength, because they're so reliant on their starting five of Brunson, OG, Hart, Bridges, and Cat. And if this team is not at full strength, which I think the odds of that are going to be high because how much they rely on them to play every night. Tibbs is playing them 40-plus minutes a night. I don't know if they're going to be at full strength. They're going to be tired. And I think just the Celtics' depth and championship experience and the Cavs' depth and their overall talent is just going to be too much for the Knicks this year. This one comes from Con, and they mentioned that Keon Ellis should be starting over Zach LaVine. He brings more defense to the starting lineup, and Zach would torch every bench unit in the league. I don't know. This one is kind of tough to get behind. I do see the reasoning behind this because the Kings' defensive unit between their starting five isn't the greatest in the world. And maybe you think about bumping Zach LaVine to a primary ball handler, and Malik Monk goes back to his natural six-man role. But I just don't think you can bench Zach LaVine. He was the main piece coming back in the De'Aaron Fox trade, and he's getting paid so much money as he's making over $40 million this year. And I know your salary shouldn't be the sole purpose for you starting, and you should be able to bench somebody no matter how much money they're making. I just don't think you could bench Zach LaVine, and I think you would have to think about benching either Monk or possibly DeMar DeRozan in a six-man type role before LaVine, but I'm fine with getting Keon Ellis in the starting lineup. I know LaVine hasn't been super efficient in his first few games in the Kings uniform, but I do think it's going to come around sooner than later. I like this one from Sam Decker Superfan, and they mentioned that Isaiah Collier is the best long-term asset on Utah's roster right now. I still can't believe Isaiah Collier fell to 29th overall in the NBA draft. If you guys were watching my live stream when it happened, I was so confused why he was falling this far. I liked him a ton coming into USC, but I liked his scoring ability as a guard. He's been way better as a playmaker and facilitator than a scorer in the NBA level. He's been a full-time starter in the month of February, and he's averaging 13 points and 9.5 assists a night. In 15 games in January, he averaged 7.5 assists, and he's only 20 years old, and since he was the 29th overall pick in the NBA draft, he's making almost next to nothing for the next few years, as he's making just $2.5 million this year, 1.8% of the team's cap, and then it goes down to 1.7% next year of the team's cap, 1.6% in 2 years from now, and then he's going to be making $4.9 million, 2% of the team's cap in 2028. That is a great asset. I would still probably take Keontae George and his upside over Isaiah Collier, but man, I think it's closer than we ever thought it could be this year. Obadiah is very optimistic about the Charlotte Hornets next year, as they mentioned that LaMelo Ball will be an MVP caliber player next year, and the Hornets will be in the playoffs. Now, LaMelo Ball is taking some of the most shots per 100 possessions we have seen since Kobe Bryant. This year, he's averaging 27 points, 5 rebounds, and 7 assists. But yet again, the ankle has been bothering LaMelo Ball, as he's got ankle soreness again this year. He's already missed 20-plus games. And I just can't see LaMelo Ball staying healthy next year from what we've seen in the past over the last few years. So I'm not sure if he can hit that 65-game threshold, even if he has the numbers to win the MVP award. And if he's going to win the MVP and go up against guys like Giannis, Jokic, and Shea, the Hornets need to be a top 3 team in the Eastern Conference. And even if they win the draft lottery and they draft Cooper Flagg, I don't think this team could be a top 3 seed in the Eastern Conference next year. I don't see them being better than at least New York, Cleveland, and Boston. So I think this is a hot take for sure, and you may have to wait 2 to 3 more years before this can become a little bit more realistic. Zach Shapiro says here for the Miami Heat, it's time for Coach Spo to take the Brad Stevens route and become the general manager, maybe let Chris Quinn step up. This is definitely a hot take as well, because you may be wondering if Coach Spo has possibly run its course as the coach of this team, but they were just in the NBA Finals 2 years ago in 2023, and his star player has been acting like a diva in Jimmy Butler, and he's been going at the front office with Pat Riley, and Spo is just trying to coach with the guys that are available for him. And I know they've had some bad losses as of late, as they got blown up by Milwaukee at the end of January, they got blown up by Cleveland, and recently they've gone blown out by the Boston Celtics and by the OKC Thunder. But I think Spo has done a good job developing the young core this season specifically. Khalil Ware has shown great flashes as a rookie. Nikola Jovic has been playing great as well. I don't think Jaime Jaquez had a super high ceiling in this league, so I'm fine with what he's performing with right now. And then Hero's been great. Bam's been a little disappointing, but I do think he's going to eventually bounce back. And this is with Terry Rozier not being great whatsoever. I do think Spo can still give you more than what he's handed with, but maybe if this team has a couple first-round exits over the next 2 to 3 years, I could definitely see this happening and him replacing Pat Riley as he's getting up there in age. This one comes about the Atlanta Hawks, and they mentioned that Trae Young would be the best guard in the Eastern Conference if he had a good supporting cast, specifically a significant lob threat and a secondary ball handler. Now, maybe I'm not as high on Jalen Johnson and Onyeka Okongwu, but I do think they kind of fit that criteria. Now, I know that Jalen Johnson is out for the year, and I do think Trae Young has been asked to do a ton this year with not a good supporting cast. They've either had a plethora of injuries, or now they've traded away his second best player in DeAndre Hunter. And Trae can generate so many points, as he's also averaging 11.5 assists this year, leading the NBA. And there is still a chance that Trae Young can reclaim that title as the best point guard in the Eastern Conference, because Dame is getting up there in age. Tyrese Halliburton has been dropping off a little bit. I don't know if he's going to be better than Darius Garland or Jalen Brunson next year, but it's definitely a possibility if the Hawks do get better this offseason. This one comes about the Memphis Grizzlies, and they mentioned that no team can stop a healthy Grizzlies team, and that's been the case since 2023. Now, I know they had their injuries in 2023 when they lost in round number 1 against the Lakers, and last year was just a year from hell for the Memphis Grizzlies, as everybody was basically hurt on that team. The Grizzlies are 36-18 this year. They're a top 5 team in terms of net rating. They're top 10 in offensive and defensive rating specifically, and this is still one of the more deeper teams in the whole NBA. Even with trading away Jake LaRavia and Marcus Smart at the deadline, they still have about 13 guys that I trust every single night. But can they stay healthy? Desmond Bane's been banged up this year. John Morant has missed 20-plus games. And I do think they have the depth to win a playoff series. I just don't know if I could see this team going on a run and making it to the conference finals, at least this year. Dorgo says here for the LA Clippers that now, since the Clippers have made some moves during the trade deadline, they can go deep into the playoffs and make it to the Western Conference Finals, and are now a top 5 team in the league, considering they have more depth and size on their bench with the additions of Ben Simmons, Bogdan Bogdanovic, and Jrue Eubanks. Top 5 team in the NBA, that's tough, because I don't think that they're better than Cleveland, Boston, Denver, or OKC. So does that mean they're better than the Knicks, the Rockets, the Grizzlies, the Lakers, the Timberwolves? I'm not sure about that, but I think they're right outside the top 5. They definitely got better at the deadline. I like them going from Terrence Mann to Bogdan Bogdanovic in that 3-point specialist role. And getting Ben Simmons can be huge for them if Ben Simmons can stay healthy, because we have yet to see Ben Simmons stay consistently healthy since the 2021 season. That was a long time ago. But the Clippers are one of the best defensive teams in the NBA, and if Kawhi can stay healthy with James Harden and the way Norman Powell's been staying healthy, the offense is going to be just fine. And yeah, maybe they can make it to the Western Conference Finals, even though they may not be a top 5 team on paper. This one is about the Boston Celtics, and they mentioned that the Celtics should trade Jrue Holiday after the season while he still has some value. I'm sorry to break it to you, but unless you're trading for an even worse player that has just as bad of a contract, I don't think anybody wants to trade for Jrue Holiday this offseason, as he's owed $32.5 million in 2026, $34.8 million in 2027 and has a $37 million player option in 2028 when he's going to be almost 37 years old. Jrue Holiday could still be an effective player defensively, but we are seeing a little bit of regression from Jrue this year, as last year he was an elite three-point shooter, 42% from three. This year, it's down to 34% from three, and he's down to 43% from the field, which is the lowest since earlier in his career when he was playing for the Philadelphia 76ers. Yeah, it's been over a decade since Jrue Holiday shot the basketball this poorly. So I think you're kind of stuck with Jrue Holiday for the rest of this contract, and you hope you can win another title with him. NBA 2K Clip says that the Cleveland Cavaliers have the best lineup in the NBA. And after the trade deadline, inserting DeAndre Hunter into a lineup that has a backcourt of Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell and a frontcourt of Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen, I honestly think they are right up there. The only other teams that I think could have a better lineup are the OKC Thunder and the Boston Celtics. And maybe in a way, if the Dallas Mavericks are ever fully healthy, they could have a better lineup as well. And I do want to see how DeAndre Hunter fits into this offense in a little bit more of a sample size, but he has looked solid so far. And I do think come playoff time, this could be the best starting and closing lineup in the NBA. It's just a good mix of offense and defense. Jacob says here for the Bulls that they are really convinced that making the play-in tournament is somehow a good team, despite the entire league and its fans knowing the opposite to be true. And the hottest take here is that if they fail to tear it down in the summer like they should, and we retain a lot of our better players, we'll still be picking in the top 5 in 2026 regardless. Yeah, I could definitely see that. Even if Nikola Vucevic and Lonzo Ball and all those veterans are still on the team and they don't maybe take advantage of Kobe White's trade value or Ayo Dosunmu in the offseason, this is still a bottom 5 roster in the NBA. For sure, because you have to think about the Pelicans being better than them next year, the Portland Trailblazers being better, definitely the Toronto Raptors being better, and maybe Charlotte can take that progression. So they're probably going to be right there with the Washington Wizards for the worst team in the Eastern Conference, and maybe with the Utah Jazz for the worst team in the NBA. As they are heading in the wrong direction, they cannot play defense right now, and this is a bad spot for the Chicago Bulls because they're not really developing their young core. I do hope that they try to invest a little bit more into Matas Buzelis in the second half of the year, and then hopefully they maybe can get some lottery luck in 2025. Next says here for the Milwaukee Bucks, if they move Kuzma to the small forward spot and sell high on Bobby Portis and Brook Lopez in the offseason, they could be a top 2 team in the league. Well, I hate to break it to you, man, but Bobby Portis and Brook Lopez are free agents at the end of the year. And I'm not sure if Kyle Kuzma is going to be a needle mover for this team. And I do struggle to figure out how this Milwaukee Bucks team gets better in the offseason. And with teams getting better around them, I don't think they're in the same tier as Cleveland, Boston, and New York right now. I don't think they could be a top 2 team in the league anytime soon. And the last one comes from Todd, and they mentioned that the Sixers need to try and move Embiid and focus on building around the young guys like Tyrese Maxey, Jared McCain, and Justin Edwards. While that sounds good in theory, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, as they just extended Joel Embiid before the season. He's making $51.5 million in 2026, $54 million in 2027, and $56 million in 2028. And I do think if you brought up Joel Embiid in trade talks, you are not going to get nearly enough value for what his play style can be. As last time he was healthy in the beginning of last year's season in 2024, he was one of the best, if not the best player in the NBA. But it's just the unknown with Joel Embiid, how he always gets hurt. I think the biggest mistake is signing Paul George to that 4-year max deal in the offseason. I was worried about year 3 and year 4 of that deal, and it's been an issue in year number 1. But thank God for them, they were able to take Tyrese Maxey late in the 2020 first round, and Jared McCain and Justin Edwards look like great picks in the 2024 draft. So that is going to be it for me. I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, I'd appreciate you dropping a thumbs up. Let me know what you think about your favorite team's hot take that we talked about in this video. Hit that subscribe button if you guys are not already, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.